Hello and welcome to a brand new segment here on Live from Paris. It's Campaign Chronicles, France 24's countdown to the presidential elections here. At this time every night, myself and our French politics editor Mark Perelman will dissect the latest developments in the fight for the Elysée. Good evening to you, Mark.
Good evening.
Now, we start with President Nicolas Sarkozy's bid to smooth over relations with the Muslim community. He's been visiting a mosque here in Paris, and ties have been strained at times, with Sarkozy's government accused of making inflammatory comments, the most recent involving halal meat. Well, some Muslims have also complained that a ban on women wearing the face veil in public was an attack on the country's 5 million Muslims. Mark, Sarkozy said he hoped that Muslims hadn't been offended by recent comments made by politicians, not by himself, I noted. He's referring to other ministers in his government, is he?
Well, clearly, the president, this was not a planned visit. This was decided between him and his advisors, and pretty recently, it seems, because there's a name for this. It's damage control. And today he went to the main mosque in Paris. He reiterated the need for an Islam compatible with French values, but there was also a hint of regret, and you don't hear this very often from Nicolas Sarkozy.
We want a French version of Islam. In fact, that's what we're all trying to achieve, not just an Islam that exists in France, but a French version of Islam. In this presidential election, I hope French Muslims have not been offended by unnecessary controversies.
All right, Nicolas Sarkozy there. Not quite an apology, but certainly a more relenting tone, to say the least. But he has been accused, hasn't he, of fanning the flames of Islamophobia. One editorial yesterday, I think, referred to him as Nicolas Le Pen, linking him to the far-right leader Marine Le Pen. Do you think that he's done enough to kind of play that image down?
Well, there's certainly more work to be done, because the main actor in those tensions has been his henchman, the Interior Minister Claude Guéant, who's made a number of remarks about not feeling at home anymore, about the fact that there were too many immigrants, that Islam was a lesser civilization. And he's been roundly condemned, and Nicolas Sarkozy sometimes took his distances and sometimes not. Then there was the halal meat controversy, which was launched by the far-right leader Marine Le Pen, who said most of the meat distributed in the Paris region was slaughtered according to Muslim rules. Nicolas Sarkozy then immediately said, no, it's a non-issue, I don't want to hear about it. And then he jumped on it. And so there was this feeling among Muslims that they were stigmatized, that Nicolas Sarkozy, in fishing for far-right votes, was willing to go for what the National Front advocates, which is a major stigmatizing of Muslims in France. And so the president felt he needed to atone. And although he reiterated that Islam should be an Islam of France and not just Islam in France, this is a subtlety, which means that there should be an Islam compatible with freedom, equality for women. He did go there, and just the footage of him going to a mosque is not something that's going to please the far-right voters. So there was, yes, some contrition, some atonement by Nicolas Sarkozy.
He wants an Islam à la Française, doesn't he? All right.
Exactly.
All right, let's move on to the socialists, because Sarkozy's rival, FrancoisHollande, has been addressing a campaign rally down in Marseille. FrancoisHollande did fall behind Sarkozy for the first time in opinion polls yesterday. Up until then, he had been consistently ahead. Well, tonight, he spoke about his desire to protect young French people.
Once again, I say it. I'd rather protect young people instead of rich people. That's what's making me different in this presidential campaign.
All right, a very animated FrancoisHollande tonight, first of all. I think this is the most angry and impassioned we've seen him, perhaps, in the campaign today.
Yeah, it's probably the second time, actually. He had a big rally, a really successful one in Le Bourget a couple of weeks ago, which really launched the campaign and made him really look presidential. And this was the second big rally in a very important town in Marseille, in southern France. And he was indeed very animated. It's also a way for him to convey the image that he's someone who has stamina, has energy, because he's been criticized for being soft and someone who prefers to hide behind the scenes rather than be on center stage. And tonight he showed that. The message we just heard is interesting because he's doing two things. One, he's saying to the youth, okay, you're the future of France. You're a chance. You're not a burden. So vote for me, because many young people tend not to vote. So he's trying to rally. And he's also, by saying, I want to be the president of the youth rather than the president of the rich, also saying again and again, like he's done in past week, that Nicolas Sarkozy is the president of the rich, of the wealthy, of the privileged, of big business, and that he's actually the president of all French. Nicolas Sarkozy has been fighting so hard to abandon this image of someone who's friendly with the rich and saying, I'm the president of all the French. So they're really fighting, and they're neck and neck right now in the polls for the first round for the soul of the French people. This being said, François Hollande is still way ahead in the second round.
Well, yes, I was going to ask you. We will talk about the importance of the youth vote here in France in a moment. But what about these latest polls? A big deal was made of them yesterday, and you had one poll saying that if the vote was held tomorrow, Sarkozy would beat François Hollande by 1.5%, I think it was.
Yes, in the first round. This was the first time when Nicolas Sarkozy was ahead of François Hollande in the first round. And this is something his Conservative Party faithful and his advisors had been waiting, and they had been telling journalists, once we can get even ahead of François Hollande, it's a game changer. It means, it's a whole different thing. So one poll showed him ahead, so the UMP was happy, but then one poll showed him behind. Not many, like 30% for François Hollande, 26% for Nicolas Sarkozy. But nevertheless, he's inched closer to François Hollande.
He's closed the gap, hasn't he?
He's closed the gap. However, the problem is really the second round. He has to find votes, and there are two ways he can find them, and they're contradictory. One is on the far right, and one is in the center. So it's a very tough balancing out. He's trying to perform it by one day going to a mosque, another day talking about the halal mosque, but how long can you walk on such a tightrope?
All right, that's a difficult strategy indeed. All right, now, is it a blessing or is it a curse? Well, according to the satirical French weekly Le Canard Enchaîné, former president and convicted fraudster Jacques Chirac is set to spurn his centre-right background and vote for François Hollande. Mark, can it be true?
Well, that's a big question. Jacques Chirac and François Hollande have one thing in common. They're both elected from a rural region in central France called the Corrèze. And Jacques Chirac has always been quite friendly. He's friendly in general, but with François Hollande, and in an off-the-cuff remark several months ago, he said, oh, I will vote for Hollande, And this was caught by a mic and made a whole fuss. And then Jacques Chirac said, no, I never said this. So now the Canard Enchaîné, which is a satirical weekly, but nevertheless a well-informed one, is saying that Jacques Chirac is still repeating the same thing, even though Jacques Chirac's wife, Bernadette, went to a big rally of Nicolas Sarkozy to support him. So this is a way of saying that the old hatred between Jacques Chirac and Nicolas Sarkozy, although they're from the same camp, is still there.
And it could do some damage. All right, Mark Proudman, many thanks indeed. Well, for more on the French election, do go to our website. We've got the latest polls, analysis and opinion as well. That's all at france24.com. That's it for Campaign Chronicles. Stay with us. Headlines are next.